Hey there, I'm Lana and I'm going to walk you through my process for Swiss meringue buttercream. This recipe is tried and tested. I use it for all of my cakes. It's a customer favorite, so I really hope you enjoy it and pick up some new tips and techniques to use for your buttercream. So let's get started. The first thing I'm going to show you is how to prep your Swiss meringue buttercream base. So in my bowl, I've got my egg whites and sugar. These are fresh egg whites. They're freshly cracked, and just regular good old granulated sugar. Now, if you look at it, it's very thick, it's very gluey, it's very stringy. The first trick I'm going to show you is how to really start the process of getting a smooth buttercream. And I'm going to do that by blending this mixture with an immersion blender before I cook it. So here's my immersion blender. You can pick these up on Amazon. They're about 20 bucks. Really, really good kitchen tool to have around. I use this a ton. So I'm just going to blend away until it's nice and smooth and uniform. Okay, so this mixture is blended, it's smooth, and what this does is not only gets rid of those stringy parts of the egg white, it also starts to dissolve the sugar and breaks up the protein in here, which means it's going to cook a whole lot faster for you. So this is ready to go over our burner. I have my buttercream base, my egg whites and sugar over some gently simmering water. This is my double boiler. And I'm going to whisk and I'm going to cook this mixture till it hits 165 degrees. Because I'm using fresh egg whites, it's really important to cook them up to a safe temperature so that they're safe to consume. 165 degrees will do that. And because we've really loosened up those egg whites with the immersion blender, it's going to happen pretty quickly. So I've got my thermometer here ready to go. And I'm just going to keep whisking this. Sugar is sticky. It wants to stick to the bottom of the bowl, so we're going to keep whisking so that nothing sticks. We get a nice uniform cook on our buttercream base. Now in the recipe packet, in that formula packet, you'll notice that there are 3 different versions of the formula based on whatever size mixer you're using. Here, I'm using a small KitchenAid, a 5-quart KitchenAid. Typically, when I'm making this buttercream, I'm making the 20-quart size, the large batch. And usually I'll make about 2 of those a week. So I go through usually 6 to 7 gallons of buttercream a week. But for this, we're making the baby batch. Works the exact same way no matter what batch size you're using. Your cooking may just take a little bit longer. Your whipping might take a little bit longer, but those are really the only differences. Everything else is going to be the same. So if you've made Swiss meringue buttercream before and you've never blended it prior to cooking, you probably will notice a difference in the texture, especially here as it starts to heat up. It is very, very smooth. It's very thin and it looks almost creamy, almost like heavy cream. And that's what we want. That's going to give you a really, really nice, silky, smooth final product. Okay, I'm not feeling any more sugar granules down in the bottom of the bowl. I think we're getting near our temp. So let's check it again. We're at 150 degrees. It's going to move pretty quickly from this point. 153, 55. We're looking for that 165 degree temperature mark. Don't forget to keep it moving, even if you've got your thermometer in there. All right, 165. So we'll turn our burner off. All right, so now that my base is cooked, we'll get it strained. I strain it through a super, super fine mesh strainer right into my mixer bowl. Straining this mixture is going to get rid of any undissolved sugar, any little particles of egg that maybe got a little overcooked in the bottom of the bowl. Get rid of any lumps. And that's the reason that I don't like to cook my base mixture directly in my mixer bowl. You can do that. But I like to use a separate bowl and then strain it into my mixer bowl. It also helps to take a little bit of the heat off of the mixture too. Helps to start to cool it down. All right, so we had just a few little tiny particles of some overcooked egg white in there. So now those are gone. So here's our base mixture. So we are going to get it onto our mixer. I've got my tabletop KitchenAid right here. I've had this thing for 20 plus years. It's a workhorse. I use it almost every day that I'm decorating cakes. This is my preferred mixer for running and paddling my buttercream to smooth it out before I actually decorate with it. So we'll get it onto our mixer with our whisk attachment. And we just want to start slow. Give it a chance to kind of thicken up. I'm going to put it about medium speed. So this is still very hot. We're going to keep whipping. In the meantime, I have cut up my butter. For my Swiss Meringue Buttercream, I like to use equal parts unsalted and salted butter, as opposed to adding table salt or kosher salt to my buttercream mixture. And over the years, I've found that if you add salt into your mixture, if you were to take like a teaspoon of salt and add it in, if those salt crystals don't get dissolved, it can lead to issues later when it comes to coloring your buttercream. It can actually cause some bleeding and some water spots in your buttercream because that salt will mess with the water in your buttercream. So I like to use half salted and half unsalted buttercream. You can kind of play with those a little bit. If you want your buttercream a little on the sweeter side, you can use a little bit more unsalted butter, or vice versa. So it really depends on what you like. I like to go with equal parts by weight. So what I'm looking for with my base mixture, it's not so much about the texture, it's more about the temperature. That's really important when you're making a meringue buttercream, is that you get the temperature right. So my butter is about 60 degrees. So we can leave our base mixture a little bit on the warmer side because we really want them to balance out at about 70, 75 degrees. So I don't want my meringue mixture hot, but it definitely doesn't need to whip all the way to room temperature. So at this point, I'm going to crank it all the way up. I'm going to get my vanilla extract in there, and we'll just keep whipping until it's a little bit cooler than it is right now. So let's check our mixture. It's getting very, very fluffy and airy. That's what we want. My bowl still feels very warm. That's fine. When you're playing around with the temperatures for your buttercream, as far as when to add the butter, is it too hot? Is it too cold? I would much rather my mixture be too warm because you can add your butter and then you can just keep whipping it. If this mixture gets too cool and you're adding butter that's 60 degrees, you may still wind up with some chunks of butter in your buttercream that don't get melted in, and that's not ideal. So here we're going to keep whipping it just a little bit more. All right, I just checked the temperature. We're at about 95 degrees, which I think is perfect since our butter is still at about 60-ish degrees. Those are going to balance out really, really nicely. So I'm going to keep this running at about medium speed, and I'm just going to start adding my butter. I've cut each stick of butter into about 4 big chunks, so I'm just going to start throwing it in. Okay, about half of our butter is in. And what you might notice at this point is that your mixture is starting to thin out. It's getting a little bit more on the liquidy side. That is fine. You may also go through a kind of separated phase. Totally fine also. That's what's going to happen. If you think about it in terms of chemistry, we have a very watery liquid mixture here, and we're adding a whole lot of fat to it. Just like when you're making a batter or anything else, or a vinaigrette, those two things have to emulsify. So that's what the mixing process does. So even if this goes through a really kind of separated, chunky phase, totally fine, just keep mixing. So we've got almost all of our butter in. The mixture is starting to take on a little bit of a separated look. It's fine. It's going to happen. It's just the water and the butter trying to work themselves out and come together. So we just need a little bit more fat in there, the rest of our butter, to pick up and blend with that moisture that's in our buttercream. And as we added those last few cubes of butter, we're starting to really fluff up and look like a buttercream. So what I'm going to do now is just give it a fold in the bowl. And then we're going to give it another couple of minutes just to whip and make sure that there's no chunks of butter that haven't been worked in. My bowl is still just barely warm on the outside, which is good. That's going to make sure everything blends all the way thoroughly. Give it one more scrape. There we are. Our Swiss meringue buttercream is done. Now what you'll notice at this phase is that it is very, very airy. This is not the stage where I would want to try to use it on a cake. It's just going to be too airy, and it's not going to smooth out on a cake for you. Which is why I like to make my buttercream ahead of time and then leave it in the fridge overnight, leave it in the freezer for a couple of days, and give it a chance to kind of settle down a little bit. So in the next few steps, I'm going to show you how to get this from refrigerated buttercream from a point where it's been stored for a while, to get it ready to use on a cake. So as far as storing this buttercream, I like to use a container like this. This holds exactly a gallon. I got these containers years and years ago from Walmart. They were really inexpensive. You just want something that has a tight fitting lid, is going to be airtight for you, something that you can see through so you know what's in it. And then also what's really, really important is that this fits in your microwave. So if you have to use a little bit of a smaller container to get it to fit into your microwave, go ahead and do that. So this is what I'm going to use. So in the next steps, I'm going to show you how to take buttercream that has been stored and get it ready to use on a cake. Okay, so I've got my bowl clean. And so this buttercream was in the fridge overnight, and then I pulled it out this morning. So it's still cool, but it's definitely softened up from being in the fridge. So what I'm going to do is put this buttercream into my bowl. Now, one of the keys with really getting a smooth buttercream to decorate and ice your cakes with that doesn't have air bubbles in it is to have your bowl really full. So you almost want the buttercream coming up over the top edge right here of your paddle attachment. And the way we do that is by making sure that we always have some extra buttercream hanging out in the freezer. So I pulled some extra buttercream. I've got it on the table back there in a separate container. So I'll show you that in just a second. This is coming about 3/4 of the way up the side of our bowl. So I'm going to get this onto my mixer and start running it on low speed. Okay, so the air is starting to work out of this, but it's not going to be able to do it on its own. We need to warm it up a little bit and do what's called tempering. It's just like if you're working with chocolate, tempering will make sure that your chocolate gets to the right temperature while also having the right texture. In chocolate, that's a nice firm snap and a good shine. With buttercream, it's a nice smooth, soft buttercream that's got no air bubbles in it. So you're going to get a nice smooth ice on your cake. So I've got a couple of cups of my extra buttercream here, and I just microwaved it in 30-second increments so that it's almost runny. That's what you want. You want it nice and warm. So stir it as you're microwaving it so it doesn't separate or burn, but about 30 seconds at a time. And then we're going to add this into our bowl and then just keep on mixing. And this is going to really help to warm up the buttercream that's in our mixer. It's also going to fill up our mixer so that that paddle attachment is below the surface of the buttercream. That is going to prevent any additional air from getting worked in so that we get a really nice, smooth, air bubble-free buttercream to decorate with. See that? The buttercream is all the way up at the top of that paddle. So when I'm doing this, when I'm in a production day and I'm getting my buttercream ready to go, this is about the point where you've probably got about 10 minutes of mixing. So at this point, I would get my cake boards ready. I would start to slice my cakes into layers and get my cake layers prepped. Get any syrups or mixtures prepped that you need. Do any of that additional prep work. Now, since we added that extra warm liquidy buttercream to this, it's going to happen pretty quick. It's going to get really, really nice and smooth for you, and you'll be able to decorate and ice cakes with it no problem. The way I work when I'm in production, if I've got a bunch of cakes to get done, what I'll do is get a bowl of buttercream ready to go, transfer it to a separate bowl, and then get my next batch working. So out of a bowl of buttercream this size, I can get, depending on the size of the cakes, 2 to 3 cakes filled and crumb coated and into the fridge before I need to start on the second bowl of buttercream. So while I'm working on those first couple of cakes, it really gives me plenty of time to get another batch of buttercream running and smoothing out. So we are just about there. You'll see it's really smoothing out on the surface. It looks so nice and creamy and smooth and pretty. And really, to check to see if it's ready, all you have to do is swipe your spatula through it. And if there's any air bubbles, you'll see them and you'll hear them popping. So this just needs a couple of more minutes. We're almost there. There we go. It's ready. We've got a nice, smooth, light buttercream, but we've gotten rid of all of that air. So when we decorate with it, it's going to be super, super smooth. We're going to get a very, very nice clean ice on our cakes. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. I hope it's going to help you get a really, really great final product on your buttercream. At the end of the formula packet, there are some variations on the buttercream, which I hope you try out. Those are some of my most requested flavors, and they work really, really well. They're crowd pleasers. So give those a try, and I hope you have great success with your Swiss meringue buttercream. Thanks.